As everyone knows, I had the 35th anniversary a while ago with the Hall of Fame as well. What people might not know about my introduction into the Hall of Fame with the U Vic team back in 79-80 is that I was rejected the first time I wanted to go to University of Victoria. Now, when completing high school, way back when, I was an 18-year-old kid. All I wanted to do is play basketball. As far as I was concerned, basketball was like a girlfriend. Occupied my attention 24/7. Education was simply a means to play basketball. So I studied, but it was really so that I could play basketball. So I actually do understand, kids who are really super focused on a sport. Although now, with some wisdom, years behind me, I would add, that obviously shouldn't be the sole focus in your life. I wanted to play for a particular coach, as I mentioned in the past, so I actually phoned Ken Shields from Cape Rield all the way to Victoria and tried to go there. I tried to basically sell myself and go to Victoria. He was very upfront with me and said, basically, don't come here because you're not going to play. We're on the verge of a national championship. And, basically, you just don't have the talent or the skill set to become a part of this team. So he offered me an alternative, Saskatoon, which was University of Saskatchewan, which for me at that time was kind of like, might as well have been exiled to the Northwest Territories. And I told him this. We were on a Zoom call with some of the U Vic guys. We do this weekly, but some are in and some are out. So I said to Shields, you rejected me, Shields. He said, I didn't reject you, Hamilton. He said, I gave you an option. I gave you an opportunity. In a way, for me as an 18-year-old kid, I felt rejected. Saskatoon, give me a break. But I sucked it up, and I went to Saskatoon. I had to deal with what I felt was a kind of rejection and go to a place kind of second stringer type of thing. In hindsight, it was all part of God's plan. As if I had gone into a poor me mentality and given into that, I've been rejected. And for me, it was like an all-encompassing thing. An adult might have said, don't be so stupid. But for me, it was an all-encompassing thing. If I had given into that rejection and not gone to Saskatoon, where I actually learned a skill set, because I played quite a bit there, and the coach there was Ken Shields, is one of his star players from the past, who actually taught me quite a bit. I would never have probably gone to U Vic. Or if I had, I would never have had the skill set necessary to work as hard as I needed to work just to make the team there. And in fact, perhaps I would never have become a priest. Because if you pull one thread, now this is looking back, but still, wisdom is acquired often by looking back so that we can be wiser in the present and the future. When you pull one thread from the tapestry of your life, everything can fall apart. Last week, Father Richard introduced the 7 deadly wounds: rejection, abandonment, powerlessness, confusion, fear, shame, hopelessness, and invited us to give God our worst. This week, I want to narrow the focus on the wound of rejection. Rejection is something that all of us have to deal with in some way at some points in our life, and perhaps even many. Most of us, it is many times in our life we are rejected in one way or another. We experience that. And perhaps it is going on right now in your life. In fact, rejection really goes back to the first pages of the Bible. It's a part of everyone's life as we are children of Adam and Eve. Dr. Bob Schutz calls this wound that of rejection. And this wound goes way back, as I said, to our first parents when Adam committed the sin, the original sin. And this was a moment when he, in his pride, rejected God's love for him. After Lucifer was the first to reject God's love in heaven, he went on a diabolical mission to get Adam and Eve, and thereby the rest of humanity, their children, to reject God's love as well. The backstory to this Sunday's readings has to do with rejection that leads to why Jesus is in the River Jordan being baptized. When Adam committed the original sin in his pride, he was rejecting God, and we have suffered from this ever since. We inherit this wound with the others as well, and it needs to be healed, and we cannot do this on our own. We can do some things that might help it, but we cannot get to the root of it and truly heal it on its own. That's why Jesus is there in the River Jordan. There's many reasons, but we're dealing with this wound of rejection. We suffer in so many ways because we continue to reject God. Sometimes we're not even consciously aware of it, who never rejects us. God never rejects us and never will reject us, but we still reject him. To give just a couple of examples of how this plays out in our life, this is two of what could be 1,000. We continue to reject God because of the wounds inflicted on us by a heartbreak brought on by a marriage that is breaking apart, or an individual feels it's breaking apart. This is an enormous amount of stress and pain. Or perhaps the marriage is already broken up and we feel rejected. Therefore, we feel God has rejected us. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Many young people feel rejected by God because they suffer from the fact that they don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend because they think they're not handsome enough or beautiful enough, acceptable in the right crowd, so they've been rejected. There's a whole series of other sort of situations in our life. We can feel rejected because we've lost our job. We think we're not good enough, and then that transfers over to rejecting God in our life. The good news that we need to keep hearing and telling others is that God never rejects us. God will never reject you. God, in fact, truly loves you. He truly loves me. And if you know me at all, this is not cotton candy. I'm not a cotton candy kind of person. This is like serious transformational stuff. This is like the essence. This is what makes life worth living. This is what gives life substance. It's what helps us fight to want to try and be good for each other. When we're convinced that God not only doesn't reject me, but God truly loves me. We continue, because of our weakness, we're not truly convicted or convinced of this truth. We continue to try to fill our hearts with substitutes like hours in front of the screens, or trying to keep ourselves distracted so we don't have to deal with life. I always try and tell people in one way or another that sometimes, as much as life can suck, or we feel like it sucks because we're going through this rejection or some other pain in our life, Jesus Christ came into the world. It's one of the profound realities of Jesus being in the manger. Jesus came into our life in this real world, into the trenches, into our day-to-day struggles. He didn't have to do this. He came into our real life to walk with us in this war that we're in this battle. Walk side by side with us. Even though I walk in the valley of darkness, I fear no evil. Why? Because you are at my side. With your rod and your staff, you give me comfort. Not because I have all the answers to life's mysteries or questions or sufferings or pains, but because you're here with me. So much do you love me. God, who is truly loves us, has made available to us the remedy for the wound of rejection that we're all born with. God truly wants to fill our hearts with himself, as he knows that only he can bring us true happiness and fulfillment. We often underestimate the importance of this remedy, this divine medicine, and yet it possesses or contains all of the medicine, all the power for our wound of rejection. It makes very clear we are loved by God and have never, in fact, been rejected. The remedy is baptism. Baptism is a sacrament that yells out to us, if it could be personified, like become a person. it like yells out to us, God always says yes. I love you. I will never reject you. And I'll prove it. I'll prove it by becoming one of you, and I'll get into the waters of the Jordan. I don't have to be baptized, but I'm doing this for you so that you can share in my own life, so that you can be convinced, if I have to say it 100 million times over, that I love you. I have never rejected you. I will never reject you. This is not just something that is meant to mesmerize us or somehow lull us to sleep, but it's transformative. It changes our life. It's like falling in love with somebody. Really falling in love in the right way. Because with the way we use this word love, we can manipulate, dominate for our own selfish purposes. But true love seeks the good of another as the other. So when we fall in love with somebody, we're already, if we're going to be tempted still, because we're in this world, but we will reject those things because I love this person, and nothing will be allowed to harm this love that I have. That is what real love does. It keeps us faithful, keeps us loyal and true to the end. But we have to, as I'll mention in a moment, we have to fill this again, we have to strengthen this again, because we can't do it on our own. It's our own limited reserves. That's why baptism is so important, because it's not limited in its reserves. Hearing all of this, you might wonder, if baptism is so marvelous a remedy for the rejection we're born with, then why is there such a distance between God's yes, God's true affirmation, and the way we live our life so often? Like sometimes we're up and down like a seesaw. Why do some people respond like John Paul II, who seemed to be on a steady trajectory towards the Lord, or Mother Teresa, and some like Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, who was a baptized Catholic? And there's all of us in between, perhaps, up and down seesaw in our relationship with the Lord. Why is this disparity present? We feel the tension in our life. Here's a response to this question given by Father Cantalamessa. He said, sacraments are not magic rites that act mechanically, without people's knowledge. The fruit of the sacrament depends wholly on divine grace. However, this divine grace does not act without the yes, the consent and affirmation of the person. This is why it's so important, as I'll mention in a moment, that parents don't just have their kids baptized and that's it. As we sort of sometimes say, matched, hatched, and dispatched. They'll come to the church in baptism for marriage and burial. No, we need so much more. God is giving us his yes, but often we say no, or we struggle with giving him our yes because we think that somehow God doesn't love me. God has rejected me. Maybe he tolerates me, but he doesn't really love me. The more we allow the grace of our baptism to work its powerful work in our lives, the more we will experience happiness and real joy. It's like falling in love. It's the closest example I can use. And anybody who has truly fallen in love knows what this is like. Now, you can't have that effervescent feeling all the time, but love deepens and actually solidifies, and it helps the will become more forged in its decision to be faithful to this person. And so when temptations come, out, maybe not that dramatically, but that's just to wake you up. But we won't tolerate it because this is precious to me, and I won't let anything take this away from me. I want this all my life. That's what's so important about baptism, is falling in love with Christ and recognizing that he gives us this power to do this. It's not just a ceremony we go through, get the family together, and it's all that, but it's so much more. When this happens, three things occur. When we are baptized and we let the power of baptism sort of be released in our life, we overcome even the desire to commit sin. We'll be tempted, for sure. Everybody's tempted. But we'll recognize this for what it is. I will not allow this to take me away from my love. And then we want to establish priorities in our life in accordance with the person that we love, and to really grow in virtue, to be the best we can be for that person. We all have to deal with rejection because from conception, we are out of friendship with God. We have these wounds in our soul. We conclude that God rejects us, or at best tolerates us, and we need to name this lie. It's a lie from the father of lies, and he plays the same playbook all the time to convince us that God doesn't love us, and then we go off on all sorts of tangents in our life. We can be rejected from this team or that team. We can reject this person's friendship, or they reject us. We can reject others and even God himself, but God never rejects us. God wants to fill our hearts with his love. God always says yes to us. The question is, will we continue to say no, or be sort of engaged in this, some sort of struggle to actually say yes to him, but not really be convicted or convinced of this? And I'm not saying, don't get the impression that just because you say a total yes to God doesn't mean that your tensions or struggles will be over. But this will give you something that many of us don't have until we get to this point. And if you've fallen in love, you know what I mean. It draws you to this person. You want to be one with them. And all sorts of decisions flow from that if your love is serious. That's the key here. So what can a no look like? And this is not an indictment. This is to make people think. One way is having our children baptized and then having no serious intention of bringing them up in the practice of the faith. Parents actually swear an oath, make a covenant with God, that God will be their God. He'll help them and get all the graces they need with baptism to raise their children in the faith. And they say, I do, I do, I do. It's a marriage covenant between the parents and God. I will give you whatever you need. I will have your back. So if there's no serious intention to follow through on raising them in the faith, bringing them to Mass, and teaching them to pray, that's what a no looks like. What does a yes look like? Our yes is like starting the day with prayer and allowing God to fill our heart with the acceptance of his love. Now again, I'll say, this is not some sort of sugary kind of love. This is a love that actually, it motivates our heart. It grounds me in the certitude that I am a son or daughter of God. It helps us to make decisions in our life that are good for us, that help us to be truly happy. It helps us to deal with temptations that come at us. And we need to do this every single day. As one theologian said, we leak grace. It leaks out of us. It's like having a glass full of water and I come up against you and we bounce up against each other and the water goes out of the glass. By the end of the day, the glass feels empty. We're exhausted. We're tired. We're ticked off. All those kind of things. We need to go back to God. He fills it up again. That's why daily prayer is so important. Just like sleep, we need to have sleep every day. We need to be filled up and reassured by the Lord that he loves us and will be with us today. So hear these words when you think about, when you, in your mind, see Jesus being baptized by John. I will never reject you. I will never reject you. I want you to be convinced of this and convicted of this so that not only for your own good, because I truly love you, but also so that you may be armed against the liar, the father of lies, who will try to take you away from me. I will never reject you. I have always loved you with an everlasting love, and I'm here to prove it.